Hello, Internet! Gino, that Pinguino Grieco here again with another episode of Deep Listens, and today it is time to ride on the Magic School Bus, which means I am joined by my fellow, I guess you might be the driver of the Magic School Bus? Unclear, your official title, but I am joined by special guest, Harry Aquaman Ganz.
I like to think of myself as Liz.
Yeah. I like to see myself as a iguana.
Yes. I mean, I don't think Liz is an iguana. Maybe they refer to her as an iguana, but she looks more like Jackson's chameleon because she has those horns.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what? I might be wrong about the type of lizard that Liz is, and if I am, I'm sorry, Liz.
It's fine. I'm sure that Liz will forgive you.
Liz is, if anything, Liz is forgiving. And today we are going to be discussing The Magic School Bus Explores the Ocean. And there's a fun story about why we are talking about this game today. We have known each other for a while, and I said to you at one point, "Hey, I would like to have you on the podcast," and you said yes, but there's one game I definitely want to talk about. And I said, "Wait a second, pause. Let me guess what game it is." And you said, "Sure." And I said, "Do you want to talk about The Magic School Bus Explores the Ocean?" And you said...
Yeah, of course. And I was surprised because I didn't think that many people played it.
I had one shot, one kill. Of all the video games in the entire world, one kill.
Your podcast listeners don't really know me, but if you know me, you'll know I tend to talk a lot about marine biology. I was a marine biologist in a previous life, and I don't mean that literally. I was a marine biologist in a previous job, but yeah, I tend to bring everything back to it. We could be talking about algorithms, and I'll bring it back to marine biology.
Yes, so I figured that this. I actually, at one point, wanted to become a marine biologist, not a small degree due to this game, and I figured we have very similar interests, and our lines of thought tend to go down similar pathways, and so it seemed to make sense to me that you would have been inspired to become a marine biologist by this video game. And it was right.
Yep. That, and also just, I lived in Miami, and I grew up near the water.
Okay. Yeah,
there's a lot of cool stuff there. I feel bad for anyone who wants to be a marine biologist and grows up in New Jersey.
Yeah. Growing up in New York, it does not. I mean, the Long Island Sound is there, but that's not a body of water you want to ever get in.
No.
Though I did actually find a flute. I guess it's a flute fish in the Long Island Sound once. It was really baffling to me.
A flute fish,
like one of those skinny-looking dudes.
Do you mean trumpet fish?
Yes, a trumpet fish. A little trumpet fish.
There probably is a flute fish. I mean, they have everything is a fish. Name an object, and there's probably a fish named after it.
That is true. And so we will be discussing the Magic School Bus. But before that, a reminder about feedback. If you want to reach the show, you can do so at Deep Listens Pod or at That Pinguino on Twitter. You can also send us comments at deeplistens.libsyn.com. You can hit up our comment sections, or you can send us an email, deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. We do not have any feedback for this particular episode because this is a co-hostless episode, and most of the feedback we have requires specific co-hosts. So, whatever. But hit us up. Do it. It feels good. And without further delay, let us discuss The Magic School Bus Explores the Ocean. Do you want to set up what is The Magic School Bus Explores the Ocean? Where are we? What's going on?
So, The Magic School Bus Explores the Ocean is a point-and-click adventure. It came out in the 90s, I guess. I'm not entirely sure exactly when it came out.
1 second, let me grab the case. I have the game right here.
Oh, wow, you have the case. I played it on DOSBox on some website. And it was a lot of fun. I don't remember the original case. What does the case look like?
All right. So the case says 1994 to 95.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
So according to the case, it says, go on an undersea adventure with Miss Frizzle and the class. You'll explore the ocean from tide pools to the deep sea as you follow clues to find the missing treasure. That's it.
Yeah. Do you think we need to introduce the Magic School Bus?
Yes.
To your listeners?
Yes. We have millennial listeners.
Yeah. The Magic School Bus is was a TV series, a cartoon. They have a remake of it on Netflix right now, which if you haven't seen it, even if you're like 27 like me, I suggest that you go and you watch it because it's pretty cool. It's a fun thing to watch. And it teaches science, and the whole gimmick is that the teacher, Miss Frizzle, takes everyone out on field trips pretty much every day, which is unheard of nowadays because of all the liability.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how many permission slips people had to sign. And so they go out on field trips, and their school bus transforms into various objects. So in this one, the school bus is almost always a submarine. And there are other TV shows, there are other shows, episodes, where the school bus will transform into something that can go into someone's body. And somehow it also has all these gadgets and things that the kids could use. And it's just this crazy, crazy show. But the really nice thing about it is that they get their science pretty good, and they try to teach it in a very entertaining way, which you don't see in a lot of shows nowadays. I don't know. I mean, I don't watch kids shows. Do you watch any kid shows?
I do, but most of the kid shows I occasionally watch do not necessarily go for science. I will say that Teen Titans Go had an amazing episode on pyramid schemes and why you should avoid them, and an amazing episode on investing in real estate.
That's surprising. Aren't they superheroes?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
So they're superheroes that prevent people from joining pyramid schemes. I guess that's important. That's a superpower.
Yeah, one of the superheroes gets tricked into a pyramid scheme, and then he's told that he needs to sign up a few friends to join the pyramid scheme, and then he'll get the real money. And then he says, I'm going to get this pyramid mummy money. And then it turns out that it's an evil scheme. Actually, and the head of the pyramid scheme is a mummy.
Wow. Yes.
That's pretty great. And then there's an episode where they teach a hard lesson, and they say, look, what you need to do is invest your money in commercial real estate, and then you need to rent that to people, and then it will grow your investment over time. And it's a 15-minute episode on investing prudently in real estate long term.
I kind of wonder what the thought process was before making
either of those episodes.
So in the Magic School Bus, they had a similar crazy episode. It's one of these things, and we started talking about it. I'm like, did I dream this, or did this really happen? Because in one of the episodes, they basically become salmon.
Yes.
And one of the strangest parts of that episode is where they turn into eggs and are fertilized by the male salmon. And so basically, the male deposits sperm onto them, and then they fertilize into actual salmon fry. And did that just happen? Did I see that? And I remembered this, having seen it many, many years prior. And I thought, there's no way this happened. I just kind of dreamed it. But then I went and I found the episode on Netflix. All the old episodes are on Netflix.
They are.
And
yeah.
it was there. It exists. They
yeah.
did indeed inseminate a bunch of school children.
But in the Magic School Bus Explores the Ocean, no school children are inseminated as salmon.
As far as I know, I mean, it is a very deep game. There's so much to do.
Yes.
Basically, the way the game is set up, you have a bunch of different zones, and you can go from one zone to another. And then when you open up a zone, it has just a bunch of things that you can click on, and you click on them, and things happen. And there's a main quest line, which is you have a treasure hunt. And then there's all these mini games and things that you could also click on. And each of them teaches you something. Literally, you'll click on something and it'll trigger an event where one of the kids is talking to another. They make some joke, but the entire thing they're talking about is some fact.
Yeah. And the game, it starts you off on the beach, and from there's a few things to click on. There's one mini game per zone and one experiment per zone. And in the sandy beach, the mini game is a little crab. You need to help it catch, I think, clams It eats clams, and then it needs to hide from birds. And the more you play, the more fish cards you get.
Yeah, and the fish cards are pretty accurate representations of fish. One of the things I was really impressed by as someone who had to identify fish for part of his living, I guess, is how well drawn a lot of the fish were. There were some notable exceptions. So, for instance, not on a fish card, but in the actual game, they have a sailfish.
Yeah.
And it notably does not have a sail. It's like very clearly not a sailfish. It's some sort of billfish, but it's definitely not a sailfish. And I don't know why. Like, the artist did such a good job. I kind of wonder what happens like when they get something wrong.
They get called into the office and told that their services are no longer needed.
Yeah, but what's the decision making process? Do they like, I'm just going to draw something and they'll put it in the game, or maybe I feel like it's probably not their fault. They get told to draw something and then someone uses it improperly. I don't know.
I don't know what happened.
There are some other things that are like obviously wrong. Like on the beach, they have a turtle, and it's a sea turtle, and the sea turtle is able to retract its flippers and its head into the shell, and sea turtles can't do that.
Well, to be fair, in the Magic School Bus, I'm not gonna go down. We will go down some more scientific inaccuracies in the near future when we discuss more screens. But I just wanted to set up. You start off on the sandy beach. The setup of the game is you hit a little bottle with a message in it, and it's a treasure map. And then Miss Frizzle sends you on an adventure by giving you a clue that basically encourages you to click on something in the world that matches this description. Like, one of them basically describes the sea turtle, and if you click on the sea turtle, then Miss Frizzle's like, oh, you did it. Now the next hint is this. And you just basically need to find 3 things that match the hints. And that is the goal of the game.
Yeah, but like Skyrim, the main quest is very short, and the side quests are the real part of the game.
Yes, I really want a speed run, like as many Magic School Bus games as I can, back to back to back to back to back. Just like 1 minute, 2 minutes, let's go.
Well, the clues get repeated, I know because I played it enough. So once you get to know the game, you can literally speedrun it really quickly. There's no clicking and pointing that needs to be done.
Yeah, you just need to figure out exactly where you need to go. And once you're sent on your little adventure, I basically clicked on the Magic School Bus, and you get to create your driver's license, which I feel is one of the more amazing things in this game is the character creator.
Yes.
Did you play around with it?
The character creator is great. I did play around with it. One is it's definitely a Monster Factory type of thing.
Yes.
Where you can just create the most absurd looking faces possible. And it's not even like a slider, right? They didn't have procedural face generation. These are all presets. But the presets are just nuts.
Yeah. There's a skin tone slider, and then there are presets for hair, eyes, nose, mouth.
Yes, and you can create these monstrosities with weird facial hair and tongues lolling out of their mouths and giant noses and just crazy things. But the best part is the sound effects.
Yes. Yeah. Every time you toggle between different like eyes or nose or anything like that. One, it's important to mention almost none of the actual options you have look like human features. You can only make monsters. It's very hard to make something that looks like an actual human being in this game. And 2, every time you change between a different selector, it goes splat. And there's just a human it sounds like Foley work.
It does it. You know what it sounds like? It sounds like that guy from Police Academy.
Yes.
Because they're clearly sound effects, but instead of actually being sound effects, it's just some guy making sound effects with his voice.
Yep. But the best part is if you just keep clicking, the faster you click, it's not like it doesn't stop the previous sound effect. They just keep layering, and some of the sound effects are long enough that you can just splat. And it just sounds like garbage.
Yeah, there's no interrupt on the previous sound. So as the sound is playing, you can play the next sound very quickly.
Yes. And another great thing about the character creator is both the name and the age fields are free text. So I made a character named Gorp whose age was fish. You can just type whatever you want.
Ultimately, is that like I mean, we're both programmers. So from a programmer perspective, considering these fields aren't necessary, is this a good implementation of Yagni? You ain't gonna need it? Or is this just bad sanitization of fields?
I think it's totally, you ain't gonna need it. I don't think you need to actually sanitize the age field. The only reason you even use that is for you can take screenshots and like print stuff. This game actually has a like button to print things, and one of the things I remember as a child printing out was my driver's license.
Oh
for the
yeah,
Magic School Bus.
I totally forgot that I used to do that. Yeah, I totally printed them out. Why did I print them out?
Because I needed to let people know that Gorp was age fish. My
I got
awesome
it.
picture.
Now you just screenshot it and then tweet it.
Yes, that is the modern. Print it out and put it on your refrigerator.
I wonder what Trump's refrigerator is filled with, if that's true.
Oh no. This Magic School Bus episode got political.
We'll try to keep it from being political.
Yeah. But I really enjoyed making my monstrosity of a character. And once you get past that, you get into the Magic School Bus. And inside the Magic School Bus, there's basically two screens. There's the driver's seat, where you've got a couple different things to click on. There's a periscope that only seems to actually do stuff when you're in the open ocean. Otherwise, it just shows you like a static screenshot. There's a little printer that when you click on it, it will print out a little dossier. And then there's a clam with sunglasses that will make weird jokes in like a New York accent. About like there'll be some pictures, and then when you click on the pictures, the clam will tell you facts and make jokes.
Yeah, that I thought that those facts were usually the most interesting, because one of the problems I have, and I feel like a lot of people have this, when you go to any aquarium, all of the facts that they tell you about things are always the same. So for instance, clownfish live in anemones. Great, I haven't heard that a billion times. But for whatever reason, what they chose to tell you in the Magic School Bus are the lesser known of those kind of facts. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Did you notice that? Is that something that you noticed as well?
What, that all of the different, all the aquariums basically repeat facts and locales over and over again?
Yeah,
Yeah.
You can go to an aquarium in Miami, you can go to an aquarium in Baltimore or in a lot in Israel. And all of the facts that they have listed for all of the different things are always going to be the same.
And I think I blame Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
For the preponderance of clownfish. There is usually in every aquarium I've been to, as I've gone to aquariums on multiple continents, and there is always a Finding Nemo tank. And it is, I don't say like it's a coral reef tank, because it's not just the coral reef. It's always, hey, there's a Dory, here's a Nemo, and it's just one by one the different fish that were in Finding Nemo.
As someone who actually had a tank with clownfish in it, you don't know how annoying it was to me when people would come into my house and they'd be like, oh, hey, it's a Nemo. And I'm like, no, that's a percula clownfish. It's not even the same species. What are you talking about?
Well, I would imagine as a marine biologist, you get a lot of just, you idiot, this is different than what you think it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that. I think, for example, another thing that happens a lot in aquariums is it's always, oh, sharks are less dangerous than people think they are. They're only responsible for, 5 deaths a year or something like that. And humans kill 60,000 or 600,000. I don't know. So just some ridiculous number of sharks per year. And like, that's all true. But again, they're belaboring the point. It's something that you see in every single aquarium in the country. Yeah. And the Magic School Bus did a very good job at avoiding those types of facts that everybody already knows.
Yeah, they managed to find some more obscure fish and some more interesting one-off situations. Like, I think I found one fact that was like about a specific type of dolphin that likes to jump out of the water and spin around.
Yeah, surprisingly named spinner dolphins.
Yes, the spin-a-dolphin. And then the clam is just like, the spin-a-dolphin. And I'm getting dizzy.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, little clam, you're great. And then when I clicked on the clam, it didn't like it. Didn't like it at all.
The clam does not like when you click on it.
So in the cockpit, you've got the clam of facts. You've got the option to change which screen you're on. So that's where you can jump between these different areas. Some of the areas, like I think there's the sandy beach can let you go to the tide pool or the open ocean if you just click around on the screen. But you can also just jump into the school bus and select between all of them. You have an option to go outside into the water. And then in the second room, you can play mini-games. Like there's one mini-game per area. There's always an experiment that Miss Frizzle can show you that kind of lines up with whatever area you're in. Like, for example, in the open... Oh, I forget what the open ocean one is. Oh, the open ocean one is the fish creator, which is great.
The fish creator is great. I remember that being one of my favorite mini-games.
Yeah, and then you can talk to Ralph, like some kid, and they will tell you some facts. There's also a dress-up game that you can play where you can dress up Carlos or Dorothy Ann in ridiculous costumes. You can look at your fish cards. And then I think that... Oh, and there's also school reports. I don't know if you found those.
I did. That's in. You just click on it and the book comes out and it has a report that someone wrote. And that has... I thought that was incredibly impressive, some of them. They had a GIF of Tuna swimming. And I kind of wondered, GIFs are super old and then they came back. It was weird. I just remember thinking, wow, this is interesting technology for the mid-90s.
Yeah, this game has... I was super surprised that the Magic School Bus is a 3D model and not 2D. I mean, it barely moves, but...
It does move, but I think it's sprite-based. I'm not sure.
But it looks like Donkey Kong Country, I should say. Like some Donkey Kong Country 3D model that's actually a sprite.
Yeah.
But exploring these different environments, like there's a lot of stuff to click on. There's a lot of different ways that this game teaches. And I thought that was really interesting. Like you've got the reports, you've got the experiments, you've got this clam that'll shout facts at you. You can click on each of the different like fish and stuff in the environment, and then you'll get facts. You can solve puzzles, and that will also give you some more facts. Or you can like use the periscope, all these different things that not only do they entertain, but they also inform. And I thought that the game was really good about giving a kid who's inquisitive a bunch of different avenues to access information.
Yeah, some of the information is presented in a lot of different ways. So some of it is you have things that are very explicit, like you go to the clam and the clam will just literally tell you facts. Which maybe is not that enjoyable for some kids. I was a weird kid, and I kind of like that more than other things. My favorite Disney park is Epcot, which I feel like is just a museum that everybody hates.
Yeah.
But
yep, that's accurate.
That's me. But then there are other things where, for instance, you have a mini game where you arrange sand and wind in a tank for Liz to surf on. And it's teaching you something, which is how waves form. But you're just playing a game, right? As a kid, all you're doing is really playing a game. And so the information is kind of secondary to the mechanics. And you had both of those.
Yeah, so which of the experiments did you like the most? There are a bunch. There's one per area.
I don't know quite what you mean by experiment. Does that include like the fish creator, the fish racer?
Yeah, so the experiments, Miss Frizzle's kind of sitting in front of a computer in the back seat of the Magic School Bus. If you just click on the screen that she's next to, it's a thing that doesn't give you. I call it an experiment because it's usually something interactive that doesn't give you any sort of reward for playing with it. It's just a cool thing that will generally teach you some facts by trial and error.
Yeah,
there's a little kind of, I guess you'd call it like a console that when you hover over it, it opens up and you'll see like a gold version of some minigame thing. And then when you click on that, they're actual minigames that will give you rewards. They'll give you fish cards for playing. So that's how I kind of differentiated them. The experiments are just kind of teaching moments, and then the minigames are rewarding you with fish cards.
Yeah, so I really like the fish creator. I thought it did a good job of teaching you what makes a hydrodynamic fish, as well as being fun because you get to create fish and race them. And so that was my favorite. Also, it's my favorite because I like tuna and they're really fast.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. So the goal of that experiment is you're racing a tuna, and it's to create a fish that is faster than a tuna.
Yes.
And I enjoyed that it kind of challenged my preconceived notions of what what a hydrodynamic fish would be. Like you might think it's skinny, so that it won't have as much water resistance, but that gets you a barracuda, and a barracuda does not actually go very fast.
Yeah.
You actually need like a big bump in the front, or a big bump in the middle, and then taper, and it ends up that a sailfish is the fastest.
Yeah, they don't tell you why that is, but it's actually true. If you have, you could think of it like if you're making a car and the car has, the car can be really small, but if behind it doesn't taper, then you end up with basically this drag behind it because it creates like a vacuum as it goes, and that vacuum creates drag that pulls on it. And so the same thing happens with fish. Although it is true that with a barracuda, they're really quick. So the difference is like a tuna can get up to a really high speed, but it takes it a while. They're not very maneuverable, and they can't dart quickly. They can't like go from 0 to 60 really quickly. So you can think of barracuda as like the muscle cars of the ocean, and tuna as like the sports cars of the ocean.
Sure. One is quick twitch, and the other one is this long distance sprinter.
Yeah. Yeah, tuna are like these long distance sprinters. And another interesting thing about tuna that they just don't have in the Magic School Bus, probably because there's too much stuff in there already, is that tuna also have a difficult time turning. Their turning radius is gigantic. So you should know if you're ever being chased by a tuna, if you can just turn quickly, it'll just shoot past you because they can't turn very quickly.
No, if you're getting chased by a tuna, you turn and fight.
Turn and fight the tuna.
You take it on.
There's a movie with that where it has a tuna fighting a shark.
Really?
Wait, what movie is that? It's called like The Assistant or The Apprentice or whatever. It has what's his name? Mark.
Mark Wahlberg?
Mark Wahlberg, thank you. It has Mark Wahlberg, and he's in The Anchorman. I'm really bad with actors' names.
Will Ferrell?
Yeah, Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg have an argument about whether a tuna would beat a lion or not.
So as a fish expert, which would win in the fight?
I mean, it really depends on where you are.
Yeah.
And this is actually discussed in the actual movie, but if it's in the ocean, the lion doesn't have a chance.
That's
and people
true.
I mean, also it depends on what type of tuna it is, but like bluefin tuna can get over 1,000 pounds, so they're not to be trifled with. They can get really gigantic, and that's much larger than a lion.
I love this idea. Now, why doesn't Miss Frizzle have an experiment where I can put a bluefin tuna and a lion, and then choose which environment they're fighting in and how big each of them is?
I feel like that's a little bit too violent for a kid's game.
That's fair. My favorite one of the experiments was the one in the kelp forest. That one, there's a little kelp plant, and then you can choose whether the ground is sandy or gravelly, whether the temperature is high or low, and whether the wave action is higher or not. And that lets you figure out what the ideal conditions are for kelp. And it turns out it's basically what's going on in the Pacific Ocean. Rocky bottom, low wave action, cold water.
Yep. Yeah, and the strange thing is what we call kelp is actually not all the same. Like Pacific kelp in the Pacific is totally different than in the Atlantic. So I guess that's a little bit misleading. But we can't all use scientific names.
Yeah, of course. So, of the mini games, which was your favorite?
Of the mini games.
So, is there anything that gave you a fish card?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I honestly thought most of the mini games are kind of silly. I could tell you very easily what my least favorite is. What do you think my least favorite mini game is? Hopefully it was yours too.
I really disliked the maze.
Oh, the maze? I didn't mind the maze that much.
It just didn't control that well for me.
Yeah, the controls are awful. And it was hard to see. It was at a weird angle. My least favorite was that stupid diatom puzzle, the plankton puzzle.
I didn't mind the diatom. So that one is just an image that's broken up, and then you put the puzzle pieces in the proper place. It's a puzzle.
It's just a puzzle. It's so stupid. Sorry,
it's pretty stupid. It's supposed to teach you the food chain, so it starts at the diatom, then it gets some zooplankton, and then it keeps going up, and it's like, oh, and you end up with killer whales. But, I mean, I liked it because it was the easiest way to get fish cards.
It is an easy way to get fish cards, but it was a stupid puzzle.
Yes.
As for my favorite puzzle, probably actually the first one, the crab and the super fat seagull. I've never seen a seagull that fat. Also, it doesn't really look like a seagull.
How many levels did you play of that?
I don't remember. Probably not that many. I would get bored of the mini games pretty quickly.
Yeah, I got to the point where it was like 3 or 4 seagulls flying around.
Yeah.
It starts with a fat seagull, then you get a skinny seagull, then you get 2 fat seagulls, and it just keeps escalating.
Yes.
And the holes get small. There are fewer holes. Then you got to hide in the water.
Yes.
High-level strat, hide in the water.
Exactly, a high-level strategy there.
Also, high-level strat, there are fish, little baby fish that swim by occasionally. You can eat those too.
Ah, I don't think I ever noticed that.
Yeah. This game has depth.
It does indeed have depth.
I actually was really impressed with the little fish game, the one in the tide pool.
Oh yeah, that actually was. I remember that being a good game as well. You have to get across the tide pool and avoid obstacles. And you can do things like jump, and the water keeps on getting lower. It like goes down and it goes up. So you have to plan on where you're going to be when the water goes down, so you don't end up dying.
Yeah, and it taught you a harsh lesson about life and death, which I appreciated in this game.
Yes, I mean, I feel there are fish that do that. They just hang out in tide pools. It helps. What they should have had is have predators in the deep water. Did they have that later in the game? Did that exist?
So there were predators, but in the actual tide pool game,
yeah,
like the Minigame, no. I think that the tide pools you needed to navigate just became more complex and involved more jumping by necessity and more stretches of just inhospitable land that you had to really quickly move through.
Yes. So yeah, in reality, the reason why you'll have little fish hanging out in tide pools is to avoid predators.
Yeah, makes sense. And then the main part of the game is finding little facts and getting the treasure.
Yep, clicking around, watching parrotfish poop.
Yes. So now that I think we've covered everything in the Magic School Bus. Now let's get to the part that I wanted you on for. Let's talk some facts about fish.
Okay.
So each of these environments, we've got the sandy beach, the open ocean, the kelp forest, the tide
reef.
pool, the reef, the deep. I guess the what is the no light zone?
What do they call it?
Yeah, it's like the deep sea or something.
I think it was just called the deep sea, and then you had a black smoker. What is it? I forget what the zone was
vents.
called. Yeah, it was
Steam
the
vents or something.
deep sea vents. That's what it was.
Could you hit me with some interesting facts about each of these places? Some fish knowledge that people would be interested in.
That they had in the game.
Either they had in the game or anecdotes, any marine biologist information.
I mean, I told you I was going to focus on things that they got wrong. So,
okay. Let's go there first. And then you can regale us with fish facts.
So on the beach, they had this sea turtle, and sea turtles do go on the beach, so that's accurate, although very rarely during the day. You'll see them sometimes. And if you ever go to Hawaii, you see actually a lot of sea turtles just hanging around for no apparent reason. But I live in South Florida, and I only ever see them scuba diving and never see them near the beach. So I don't know what that's about. I guess they just like Hawaii better. And they had the sea turtle like retract into its shell, which they can't do. They're kind of just stuck out there. Although they have this really cool thing, and there's a GIF online somewhere of a sea turtle avoiding a shark by just turning its body so it exposes its shell to the shark. And it seems so nonchalant about it while it's like trying to be devoured by a tiger shark. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I saw an amazing GIF of a octopus that it was getting preyed upon by a shark, and it covered itself in shells. and then when the shark went to go investigate the shells, thinking that it was a rock, it just like threw all the shells and then pieced.
Yeah.
And then the shark was just caught trying to bite shells.
I think that's from Blue Planet too. It's a BBC documentary.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, there's a great BBC documentary, which if you have Netflix, you should see. It's called Round Planet. They took the footage from Planet Earth, and they just have a comedian dub over David Attenborough's part.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's pretty funny. And surprisingly, it's actually a documentary. Like, even though he's making up jokes, a lot of those things that he's saying are also facts, which I think is interesting.
So they managed to both be a documentary. I guess that's how they managed to like gain the rights and then not get sued.
I mean, it's made by BBC, so it's the same people.
Okay.
They didn't just do a parody. It would be interesting. I'm sure there are parodies. There's got to be parodies. They have the crazy thing in Planet Earth with the birds of paradise that you see as a GIF all the time.
Yep.
So I just thought that was good. Let's see. Yeah, they showed the parrotfish, and the parrotfish poop out sand. So oftentimes, if you're on like a nice sandy beach in the Caribbean or the South Atlantic, that's actually partially, at least, parrotfish poop.
Yep.
For whatever reason, they showed it spitting it out, which is not what they do. So it's somewhat inaccurate. I guess they didn't want to show a fish pooping in a game. I don't know why you would care. Like it's just fish poop.
It's just fish poop, and it's 90% sand.
Oh, one of the cooler things. So they had if you clicked on a parrotfish, you'll see like a trumpetfish come from behind the parrotfish, and one of the kids exclaims like, "Where did that fish come from?" And then they describe how trumpetfish will hide behind other fish to prey upon smaller fish. Mm-hmm. And that's true. But what's really cool is trumpetfish, also eels, will do this. They will literally follow large predator species like grouper around the reef. I've seen this myself. And the grouper will come out and will try to pick on little fish. But the problem is the grouper will scare the fish into little holes. And trumpetfish have these really long snouts. And what they can do is they can go into the holes and pick out the fish that the grouper had scared into them. And if they get scared back out, then the grouper goes and picks them off. So they basically do this. They hunt together, and it's mutual. It's mutually beneficial to both of them. So like one of them can get the little fish in the holes, but has a very hard time actually chasing them down when they're outside of the holes. And the other one has an easy time chasing it down when it's outside the holes, but they can't get into the holes. So they'll do it together. Yeah, eels do that too, and you'll see this especially if you go to the Red Sea. You'll see like groupers and eels hunting together.
Being friends.
I don't know if they're friends. I think, I feel like if they had the chance, they'd eat each other, but they can't. So instead, they hunt together.
They have mutual enemies.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Did you notice anything that was inaccurate that you were like, what is this?
Nothing that was like wildly inaccurate. I did notice that they really hammer home the "do not pollute" message, which I thought was appropriate.
It is appropriate, especially for kids of the age that they're targeting. Yeah. I'm very surprised about how many adults I see litter. It's so easy not to litter. I don't really understand it. It's such a strange thing.
Yeah, and it is. There's a few items that you click on that are just like bottle. What is it? Those the things that dolphins choke on and fish get caught in.
I don't actually know. Yes, I don't know how this started. So, in like 6-pack cans, you have these like plastic rings and hold them together. For whatever reason, that has become like the icon of pollution. And I think there were images of like birds whose heads got stuck in them and like they choked to death. And they're like really famous images. So that became the thing of pollution. As someone who's dived a bunch and gone to the beach, I never see those. You know what you see everywhere are the little filters on cigarettes.
Sure.
They're all over the reef. So, and it kind of makes sense because I think the number one thing that people litter is cigarette butts. Yeah. It's just like, if I have a can or a bottle or, I don't know, a box that I emptied, I'm not going to just throw it into the ocean. But for whatever reason, people think, oh, it's just a cigarette, I'll just throw it into the ocean. And for the most part, cigarettes are biodegradable, but those filters are plastic.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, the filtered cigarettes. So I don't smoke, so I might be getting this wrong. But unless you have really cheap cigarettes, they generally have a filter. Cigars don't. And supposedly cigars, they cause a higher rate of mouth cancer because they have like larger particulate. And then if you have the cigarettes, you get more lung cancer. But I don't know if that's true. That's just something I heard.
That not a great situation either way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty well established that tobacco causes cancer now.
Yeah, but I did not know that about the reef being covered in filters. I mean, in the game they show the soda can rings, and then if you play the mini game in the kelp forest, which is just you helping clean up the kelp forest, there's also I think nets that get dropped, like big nets. And in that mini game, if you don't clean up the garbage fast enough and it lands on a fish, the fish dies, and the way you lose is by too much garbage killing too many fish.
Yep, yep. It's pretty sad. What they didn't focus on, which I think would have been an important thing, is fish dying and mortality from fishing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what I studied, so maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but that's something there's no wild game left. If you think about it, you go to the supermarket and you look at things on the shelves. Everything there comes from a farm. Very little of it is gathered, right? You don't see berries. Your blueberries are not gathered from the wild; they were farmed.
Yeah.
Your beef comes from a farm. Your chicken comes from a farm. Your eggs come from a farm. Your milk comes from a farm. The only thing that doesn't is, for the most part, seafood. So there's farm salmon now, and for some reason, people think that wild salmon is better. But when it comes to being better for the environment, definitely farm salmon is better. I think there's some muddying of the water that happens with salmon, which is they say, oh, there's so much waste from farm salmon. They have a lot of runoff from the fish food that the fish don't eat, and then they poop it out, and then that gets dumped into the ocean. And that's totally true. It's 100% accurate. But I think that is probably better than just taking fish out of the ocean and killing them. Like, the first argument is, oh, by dumping all this waste, it causes plankton blooms, which reduce the oxygen level, which causes fish kills, which does happen. And the other one is, you just literally kill the fish. Killing the fish is a much more direct way of killing them than overfeeding your farmed fish.
Yes, and many of the problems with salmon, like in farming situations, like parasites and buildup of some diseases among fish that wouldn't happen because salmon usually aren't in that sort of close proximity except when they're born and when they die. Those are problems, but they are solvable. They are far more solvable than if you take all the salmon out.
Oh, I mean, if you think farm salmon have lots of parasites, let me tell you about cod. You may never want to eat a cod again.
Well, as a vegetarian, I don't.
I'm just saying that wild fish have lots of parasites. If you want to horrify yourself, look up anisakiasis or Anisakis simplex, which is the actual parasite. Anisakiasis is the disease. If you live in Europe, in the United States, you have to pasteurize any raw fish or freeze it at least. In Europe, you can get pickled herring, and herring has a really high incidence of this parasite called Anisakis simplex. And these parasites are crazy. They have a free-living stage. They end up getting eaten by herring or small fish. They then stay in the intestines, burrow out into the muscle, and then they get eaten by whales. They live in the intestine in whales, and that's where they'll breed. So inside the gut of a whale, they'll actually breed with each other, and then they'll die, lay their eggs. The eggs will come out in the poop, and then the cycle starts all over again. What happens is, if you interrupt that by eating the herring before it can get into the whale, they'll do the same thing they do in the whale. They'll try to lay their eggs in you, but your gut actually will kill off all the eggs. But it will, in the meantime, they'll make you very sick. So Don't eat pickled herring if it's not pasteurized or it's not frozen at some point during its processing. Um, you can get anisakiasis from salmon as well. It's pretty common.
See, these are the sort of hard-hitting fish facts that I brought you on to deliver.
Yeah. I don't know if this is true. I'm not like a sushi expert, but I feel like restaurant grade sushi, at least if it's actually restaurant grade sushi, should be free from parasites. And there are a couple ways to ensure that. I mean, one of them is literally just freezing it. Another one is making sure it comes from a farm where they treat them with antibiotics or whatever. You might hate antibiotics. You might think how terrible it is that they're pumping your stuff full of antibiotics. But I still think that's better than getting parasites. I might be wrong. Who knows?
Yeah, long-term damage we'll see, but it might be better than getting sick.
Yeah.
So one thing that I know you wanted to talk about was what makes a science game, what makes it effective, what makes it fun. I think this game probably finds a really good balance between being fun and being educational.
And I think it does that without trying to find a balance. I think the problem that a lot of science games have is that they try so hard to find a balance between science and education that they end up just not being fun at all. And I think the number one important thing for a game is to be fun. And this is fun. And I think it's fun. I don't know why it's fun. Like why was this game fun?
I think that for me, learning is fun. So having those facts in there is like I played a game, I think it was Buzzy. It was a humongous entertainment game. One of the makers of Pajama Sam and Freddy Fish and Putt Putt, they made an educational game starring a little bee, and that game was a lot more just like click on things and get facts. There were some mini games too, but I just enjoyed learning as a child, and I still enjoy learning a whole lot. I mean, I host a show that's mostly about discussion and learning things. So that was fun just in and of itself. But also I think the mini games are better than they have any right to be.
They are, especially because there are so many. You would think that at least some of them would be incredibly crappy. And for me, the only one that was like that was the puzzle game. You can tell when you have like a really low effort game. I'm sure you've seen this where it's just like this is super low effort. This is like your freshman Java your freshman Java class project where you already have an A and you still need to handle in this stupid project. So you just put like you finish it up in one day and it's super crappy, just very low effort.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you would have expected from a game like this, because especially for a license thing like Magic School Bus, you'd be like, well, they can just rely on a license. Like kids are going to buy it whether it's good or not. So why spend the effort to make a good game? And they did. It's so rare to see that. I'm sure it was rare to see that then, and it's rare to see that now.
Yeah, it didn't get a lot better over time. And I think that this game, it's that each of these little mini games is actually self-contained and seems like it went through some actual process to be made. Like there are mechanics in each of them and different strategies that you need to take to complete them, and they engage with potentially different audiences. Like some of them are, like Little Fish Game is a lot more about execution and timing. It's almost like a platformer, but side-scrolling. Then you've got things like there's a fish. There's one in the deep ocean where you have a bioluminescent fish, and the goal is to get from one side of the screen to the other by identifying the light patterns of predators and friends of this fish, like things that won't eat it and things that will.
Yeah.
Because the lights go out, and then all you can see is what are those called? Phosphophores?
Photophores, I believe.
Photophores. So those are the only things you can see, which kind of communicates, it's a little bit more of a thinker. Which of these match my fish? Which of these objects can I pick up to see light so that I can make out what enemy fish there are?
If there's a game, I hope that you found it. I think it was in the open ocean, and it was not technically a minigame, nor was it an experiment, although you didn't get fish cards from it, which is the one where you had to identify whales.
Yeah, that one's awesome.
I really like that, and I remember thinking like, I thought maybe they cheated that even if you clicked it too late or too early, that you would still be able to see the mark. The way it works, because again, people listening to this don't necessarily know, is you have a camera and you're looking for whales to come up, and then as they're descending back into the water, you see their tail, and you take a picture, and then you have to compare that picture to a book of whale tails that you have, and that's how you identify which whale is which. And this is 100% what they do in actual whale watching. They 100% do this exact thing. They have a giant book of whale tails and someone with a camera, and they're going around taking pictures. And they do, and they track the sightings, and then from that you can get information about, what individual whales migrated where, survival. So if you don't see a whale for a couple of years, it may have died. And then if you see it again, it may have lived, and you can fit that to a statistical model. This is the type of math I used to do, a statistical model to figure out how many of them survived. That's not part of the game. The game is literally just taking pictures of whales. But I just thought this was a fun... I don't know why it was fun. Like, it's so weird. Like, why was this game fun?
I think that it's just education can be fun, and having a bunch of different mechanics that engage that part of your brain, it really makes for a wide level of appeal and a wide amount of fun. Because there were some things that I thought were not especially fun. There's one in I think it's the reef, where instead of having an actual experiment, you just get like a weird visual, like it almost looks like a screensaver editor that causes, like you click on things and then you just get like this wavy picture that you can hover over and click on, and it'll cause like ripples in this image. And it just feels like a weird tool. But almost all the other experiments and mini games and factoids are somewhat useful and interesting.
I think it's about mechanics, and I think it also goes back to kids love crap like this. So for instance, you give a kid who's 3 years old and you just literally give them a button, they'll just keep on pressing that button and loving it. When they get a little bit older, I think it's like simulating work, right? Simulating what they see adults doing, and that's ultimately what play is kind of simulating things. So when they get older, they play dress up, or they have, they play with dolls, and they're just basically creating houses and things. And this game is like that, except you're playing scientist in a lot of these things. You're manipulating inputs, and then you're looking at the outputs. For many of these games, that's what you're doing, especially the things that you called experiments. That's like exactly what you're doing. And that is kind of what being a scientist is like, but that's also just what playing is. It's just playing, seeing what happens when you click certain things or do certain things. Mm-hmm. And it's perfect for kids. And I think it also, the point and click type of adventure for something like this, where you're learning by clicking things, works really well, because I know that when I was a kid, I could spend hours just like trying to find hidden things in this stupid game. And I remember the first time I saw they had these manganese nodules. So in the sea floor, in the deep sea, when you get like just the sea floor, mm-hmm. There's just this sandy bottom. There's nothing there, and you're just clicking around, and on like a blank patch of ground, you click, and it gives you a fact about manganese nodules. Which, if you don't know what manganese nodules are, in the deep sea, things basically fossilize in the ocean, and they mineralize into different minerals. So some of those minerals are heavy metals that are useful, like manganese or gold. And this is actually a very important and very controversial thing in undersea law, in that you have, for instance, you have something called the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. I'm sorry, I know I'm getting on a huge tangent here.
No, this is great. I want to hear about undersea law.
I had a class about this. United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. It's called UNCLOS. and it was made in the original one, UNCLOS 1 was in 1948, I think, and UNCLOS 2 was in the 1960s, maybe 1967. I might be confusing it with the Magnuson-Stevens Act, but every country is a signatory in this thing except for like the United States, Norway, Japan, and Russia, I think. And
So the people who exploit the sea the most.
No, so here's Norway, Russia, and Japan. There's a very good reason, which is they're whaling countries.
That's what I meant by exploit the sea the most.
Yeah, but the United States signed the moratorium on whaling, so the United States doesn't whale. But we didn't sign the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea for one reason, and that is for deep seabed mineral rights. And we don't exploit that. Like, when this thing came out in the 90s, everyone thought, okay, we're going to have these big mining companies, and they're going to be pulling heavy metals out of the deep sea, and all of the electronics that you use will have like these very rare minerals coming from the deep sea. But it has never been economically viable, and yet that's the reason why we didn't sign it, because what they wanted was basically socialism for these deep seabed minerals. There's something called it's called the heritage of the. It's not the heritage of man. It's socialism. You have all of the mineral rights are split up amongst like all the countries. So even though I am actually mining the minerals, I don't get 100% of the profit. Like I have to split that amongst other countries. And it goes especially to countries that don't have the capability of mining it themselves. And the United States said, no, we're not doing this.
Weird.
I think it's called the cultural heritage of mankind. I have to Google that. But you should know that the moon has that same thing. There's something called the Moon Treaty. And the moon is considered the cultural heritage of mankind. It can't be appropriated by any country. No country can claim the moon. No country can claim Antarctica for the same reason. There is the Antarctic Treaty. And yet, every single country, if you look, they have like these pizza wedges of Antarctica that are sliced up between different countries that they do stake a claim, even though they all agree they're not going to stake a claim. And this deep seabed rights, it's the same sort of thing. And it's the most ridiculous thing ever that the United States is not a signatory, because de facto we follow all the rules. And the other thing is we also enforce it. So, for instance, China right now is building these islands in the South China Sea, and they're doing that so they can increase their exclusive economic zone and increase their mineral rights and their fishing rights to areas that were previously owned by other countries. So they're doing this right now.
Yep.
And according to the law of the sea, if I build an island, if I just take a bunch of sand, dredge it, and make an island, that does not count to my exclusive economic zone. So if I get 200 miles from my shore, I don't get 200 miles from this random island that I built.
The joke's really going to be on them when the sea levels rise just a little bit.
I mean, they could continue building them up.
No. Joke's on them.
But China doesn't care, and they're just like, no, you can, and we will. What they claim is that, oh, these islands exist, we're just expanding them. They were always there, but we're just expanding them. So that's what they're claiming. And that's awesome. Fine. Like, it's totally okay that, like, one side says this and one side says that, and they fight with each other, whatever. But for some reason, the United States has become like the world's police on this, and we're the ones who send our Navy into the South China Sea to basically...
Well, it's because we're the world's police on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because we have the world's largest Navy.
We send our Navy into their territorial... There's what they call their territorial waters and what we call international waters.
Yeah.
And it's to prove that it's actually not their waters. And so it's like this kind of brinkmanship that we're doing, this game of chicken. And it's weird because if any country can't do it, it's the United States, because we didn't actually sign that treaty. We don't actually abide by that.
That's awesome.
Technically speaking.
So, one last thing before we say goodbye to the Magic School Bus and ocean and marine biology.
Yeah.
So I feel like at one point on this show, I told a story that I think was your story, and could you please tell the listeners the amazing story of your fight with a lionfish?
Oh, yeah. So I was at Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science in University of Miami, and we had a course on research diving. And as part of that course, we did training in Bonaire, which is in the Caribbean. And we were diving in Bonaire, and we had these measuring sticks. I mean, they're basically used for measuring things underwater. We were doing what's called a transect, where you're basically counting stuff underwater and measuring it. And while we're down there, we see a lionfish. And if you don't know what a lionfish is, it's really pretty, but it's this very spiny, poisonous fish. It's not very big. It's about maybe, they can get a foot long, maybe, about the size of your arm. They're pretty fat, but most of them are smaller than that. And so we see this lionfish eating a graysby, which is a type of grouper. And we can't communicate because we're, wearing masks and we don't have the special equipment you can use to communicate. But one of the people who's doing the transect with me sees it, points it out, and takes his stick and just whacks it so that it would let go of the graysby. And it didn't. And then I'm like, okay, well, we should kill this thing because they're an invasive species. They basically clog up the food chain by being right in the middle of the food chain. And yet they're so toxic that nothing eats them. So they just clog up the food chain. And so he whacks it, and I whack it, and the third guy with us starts whacking it. And we're just like whacking this thing until it dies. And that's how we killed an invasive species in Bonaire. And they're hated. They're like universally hated in the Caribbean because of the fact that they've just kind of exploded in population. Nothing eats them. And they're just so hard to get rid of. They're just like one of these terrible invasive species that we don't really know what to do. They showed up, I think the first ones showed up in like 2003 or something, like late 90s, early 2000s. And now they're just everywhere. And you pretty much can't go on a dive in South Florida without seeing a bunch of them. I imagine it's similar in Bonaire, but that's not where I spent most of my time. And we just whacked it to death.
I really enjoy that you went to the bottom of the sea into the lion's den, and you came out the victor.
It's so weird. I think they're not used to being attacked. So you'd expect to happen, and if you whack a fish, is it lets go of what it's eating and it swims away. Like I imagine if you were eating something and I just whacked you, you'd probably let go of it and run away. But it didn't do that.
I'd probably let go of it. I don't know if I'd run away.
What it did is it did what you see lionfish do. It flared out its spines, and it was like challenging us to eat it. But we're not going to eat it. We're just going to kill it.
You used your humanity to say, no, we're not here to kill you for sustenance. We're here to kill you just to kill you.
It's like with James Bond. Do you want me? Are you going to? You can't eat me. Well, I'm not going to eat you, Mr. Bond. I'm going to kill you. Yeah.
Yeah, that is an amazing story. I'm so sad that you did not then take the lionfish as a trophy after fighting a lionfish barehanded.
Well, there's a couple of reasons why we didn't. One is that we had bags, but the bags were mesh bags, and the spine would stick out, and it could possibly stick us. And I don't want to, envenomate myself accidentally.
Yeah. But no matter how funny it would be.
The other reason is it technically was illegal. We were in Stinapa, which is this national park underwater in Bonaire, and you can get a license to hunt lionfish, and that's the only way that you can bring spear guns. You can't spear any fish in Bonaire, but if you take a special lionfish training course, you can then get a spear gun and use it to hunt lionfish. I don't think anyone would have cared if we brought a dead lionfish. But we definitely, like, if you have a bag with dead fish in it and you're coming out and people don't see what's in it, they'll assume you went spearing, and it's just not a good look.
Yeah, that is fair. So before we sign off, I just want to run this idea by you because you seem like the person, and I would like this idea to be out there for some industrious person to pick up. What do you think about making a restaurant that serves nothing but invasive species? And then you create an economic incentive to hunt these things that need to be hunted to local extinction, wherever they are.
I would not be surprised if it exists already, because I know that in the Florida Keys, lionfish is a big dish that people eat, and people will go and look for it. It tastes really good, by the way, right? So if you ever see lionfish on a menu, I would suggest you try it. It's a very white fish. It's kind of like cod or something like that. Doesn't have a lot of its own flavor, but has a very nice texture, and you could flavor it really nicely. But about like creating a restaurant, the problem is most invasive species don't taste good. So you'll find like the 2 or 3 invasive species that taste good, and you'll make those. I mean, I can name all the ones I know are like aquatic. So you'll have like walking catfish, snakefish, lionfish. What else are you gonna have?
Is it zebra?
Zebra mussels?
Zebra mussels.
Have you ever seen zebra mussels?
No.
They are tiny. They're like the size of a penny.
Well, get a lot of them.
Right. But I can't imagine preparing them.
Blender.
You just blend.
Really good blender.
Zebra mussels.
Kudzu. You could get kudzu.
Is that edible?
Kudzu salad.
I have no idea what that tastes like.
I don't know either, but deer in some cases. You can get deer. Wild boar.
Wild boar. I mean,
boa constrictor.
Yeah, that would be interesting. That would be very interesting. Yeah, in South Florida we have South Florida everything is invasive. Iguanas are not invasive, they're non-native, which a lot of people don't realize that they're not native to South Florida.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, they're native to a lot of places in the Caribbean, so it kind of makes sense they would be, but they're not. Yeah, but people eat iguana. So, I mean, I guess you could have iguana. You could have boa constrictor. What else would you have there? Kudzu.
I mean, lionfish, I feel like there's enough invasive wild boar, between wild boar, deer, boa constrictor, and like other weird released pets that are now a problem in the Everglades. If you could just incentivize as a like, hey, you're doing good. This is an environmental good that you're doing, and also it's delicious.
Yeah, this would work in South Florida especially because we have so many invasives, like so many. We have Brazilian pepper, which is a pepper tree, so presumably it tastes like pepper.
I just feel like our generation is more environmentally conscious than it seems like it's a weird thing that most of the political parties seem to ignore the environmentalism of our age cohort, but I feel like you could do pretty well in certain areas of the country just by saying, hey, we are not only environmentally responsible, but we are creating an economic driver to get rid of these garbage animals that are taking over certain places.
Yeah, and I do like that idea, is creating economic incentives to help the environment.
Let's eat cane toads. Let's eat the problem away.
Cane toads are incredibly toxic.
Well, you boil them.
I don't know that much about the cane toad toxin other than dogs literally can go blind from getting squirted with the toxin they have behind. They have these things called parotid glands behind their head, and they can squirt that out, and it's pretty bad, pretty nasty stuff.
Yes, but I'm just saying we need to get some good restaurateurs, some good food scientists. We just need to find the proper way to cook these things to make them appealing. Hey, if we can drive animals that are delicious to extinction, we can definitely solve some of these invasive species problems.
I think the issue, though, is you might create a perverse incentive. You'll have a carnival of errors here. You can imagine, let's say, you start driving down the population of, let's say, boa constrictors, right? And now you've completely eradicated them from Florida, but there's still an appetite for boa constrictors. So you start going to South America and taking out where they're native. Or let's say it's cheaper even just to get them from South America than it is from South Florida. So now what you're doing is you're forcing a perfectly good species to get hunted to extinction where it's native instead of where it's invasive.
Look, man, there might be perverse incentives, but I know that the status quo is not tenable.
There are certain things that are like, mosquitoes, I just don't understand. They should just be eradicated everywhere. I really don't understand what their ecological use is other than to make things miserable. Lots of parasites are like that too. Like, you read about the terrible, terrible things that parasites do to, like, snails. Like, for instance, they make them go crazy and climb up trees and get eaten by birds. And you're like, why? What a terrible thing.
That's an entertaining. That is a. You know what? That's one of those parasites, one of those animals that you just need to look at and go, "Hey, I see you. You're interesting. You're out there."
I mean, these crazy snail parasites. They also make the snails change color to be like psychedelic colors, so they're even easier to see by the birds. These are things
That's
you can't
awesome.
make up. Like if you were trying to make up a sci-fi parasite that was really weird and terrible, you couldn't make up things that actual parasites are. There's a parasite that eats a codfish's tongue and takes its place in the mouth of the cod,
That's awesome.
and then steals food every time the cod tries to eat.
That's amazing.
It's not a parasite technically, but there's a fish called the cutlips minnow. It lives in North America, and its entire diet, it has like very specialized mouth parts. And all it does is it feasts on the eyes of other fish.
Oh, no. Well, on that note, I think this will be the end of the Magic School Bus Explores the Ocean.
Yes. And we've learned that you should definitely not explore the ocean if you want to keep your eyes or your tongue.
Yes. Thank you very much, Harry. And reminder, if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so at Deep Listens Pod or at that Pinguino on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. You can hit up our comment sections or deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you, Harry.
Thanks. Good night.
Any last words, last thoughts,
I think
horrifying facts?
I think avoiding getting your eyes eaten by stuff is plenty good last words.
All right. Till next time. Peace!